now, Fittler. Puts on the step, goes right through, puts on the step again. Oh, go Freddie, that was magnificent stuff. Well, they shall not weary them. Marshall skips away, Marshall's still going. Mullins opens up again, oh, look at him go. He beats O'Davis on the outside.
Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of The Voluntary Tackle, the only NRL podcast prepared to sell Daniel Wagon-themed sex dolls to the developing world. I'm your host, Aimon Brown, and today on the show we'll be discussing all of the late-breaking news in the wonderful world of rugby league. But first, I'm joined by an expert panel of rugby league enthusiasts via Zoom in what is clearly a TBT first. And so look, I'll just rattle them off now, and then I'll bring all you guys in. The first is the host of the Hypothetic Rugby League podcast, David Hunter. The second is long-suffering Dragons victim, Jarnis Mateus. And our panel is rounded off by our usual crew of debauchery and Media Watch Mario and Xander Risotto. It's great to have you all here, guys, on the line. I hope you can all still hear me. I am using fairly old-world technology. It's essentially two Campbell's soup cans and a collection of strings, but I think it's still working. We are recording this show, of course, on an Easter Sunday, which is the one day of the year I like to bury myself in the backyard in the morning, and I rise after lunch in honour of the great JC. But enough about my habits. Xander, we're going to start with you, mate, because you are rather religious and pious. What did you do to honour this very religious occasion today?
Yeah, mate, like I mentioned before we started the recording, I spent most of it evacuating from both ends, vomiting and having incredibly loud diarrhea.
In honour of Jesus Christ.
In honour of Jesus Christ.
Well, that's excellent news, because I think by the time you get nailed up to a cross, you probably are ready to evacuate from both ends.
It was a religious experience, though, mate. I did revive on the Holy Sunday.
Fantastic. Look, we're also here. Welcome, Mario. Before I get to the other gents, your thoughts on your beloved Manly side and that very close game they had with Penrith. How did you see it?
I thought they were particularly excellent. I mean, they didn't lose by 50. So when Tommy Turbo comes back in round, 114, then we'll be ready for an undefeated drive to the premiership.
What are Tommy Turbo's hamstrings made out of, mate? Is it essentially tissue paper sort of enmeshed with like glitter glue?
Yeah, but then with some Coke poured on them and then left there to soak for a week.
As is Des's way. I mean, your strength and conditioning coach, you haven't been a fan of your club's strength and conditioning for quite a few seasons now, and for good reason. But have we named them, shamed them yet on the podcast?
No, because we'd probably get the pronunciation wrong and then get accused of being racist again. So we probably don't need that. We'll just make Hitler jokes. Those are always safe.
Yeah, the one thing this show is always safe of, it's bigotry and being accused of any discrimination. We've never really dallianced with that. We're also here with David Hunter. Welcome, David. You've already mentioned pre-show that you think you're going to be free of all the slings and the arrows. You're a mad Eels fan, and they haven't played yet. Is that the reason you've decided to clue into the show a little bit early today?
Yeah, it's definitely the reason. I felt like if we went on Monday, I could be quite embarrassed. I actually want to thank both of you guys for mentioning a fascist dictatorship early on. That's part of the reason I listen to the show, because I want to hear all about Nazis.
You get it all here on the Voluntary Tackle. That's what you like, a bit of rugby league, but mainly Pol Pot. But if we can sort of sprinkle a little bit of sport on top, then I feel like the listeners walk away with a hearty message about history. And before we close up on that, how do you think the Eels are going to go against the Tigers tomorrow? Is there any trepidation? Because as a lot of rugby league fans would know, the Eels do come out of the blocks quite well in the last couple of years. But have faded later in the season. Is there any trepidation about the Tigers tomorrow?
Look, if anyone knows me as an Eels fan, they know I'm the ultimate pessimist. I don't think that they're going to win any games ever. So, look, I always go in, just hoping that we'll be competitive. And also when we play on Easter Monday against the Tigers, we're notoriously quite bad. So, look, I'm really glad that we're doing, like I said, pre-show, I'm really glad we're doing this before this game, because, I couldn't imagine losing to being so bad as being a team that could lose to the Tigers like Newcastle did last week.
You know what I'm really impressed with there, David? You've come to the show armed with Easter Monday stats. That's very impressive. You know that your team.
Well, I don't have
you
their
are
official
a bit
stats there,
more-
Eamon. I'm just making them up. But I don't think we're very good on Easter Monday from my memory.
No, well, we accept all of that as fact. And of course, last but not least, Jarnis, you are obviously a Mad Dragons fan. Hook's Army looks to be surprising a few people. They had a win today, and they haven't had a bad start to the season. Are you sort of surprised about that, or were you quietly confident that they'd exceed everyone's expectations?
Yeah, I'd avoid the term Hook's Army, given we were just talking about some dictators of the past. I am surprised that we're doing better than what I thought we would be. But remember, we've taken on, dare I say, and sorry, Mario, I've got to say this is two teams that I wouldn't exactly say they're fighting themselves out for a spoon. And then the Knights today was good, but it was really a war of attrition rather than anything else. So I'm still letting that paint dry. But I always thought we're a bad bottom eight team. Sorry, a good bottom eight team. So about expectations is what we're delivering at the moment, I think.
Jarnis, could that be the tactic of the Dragons? As you said, the war of attrition against the Knights today, the Knights were left with only 8 people. Could that be a plan by Hook to sort of essentially kind of maim the opposition so that they sort of limp and bleed to the finish line? Is that...
I would say that we would be certainly looking at sort of, cutting off oxygen at certain levels. No, in all seriousness, I think it was the luck of the draw today. Look, it was a good win. I'm not going to say, any win up there is a good win. But I think that certainly fitness, we are looking at a fit team. I'll give Hook that. And Peter Gentle, the second oldest man in rugby league, seems to have got our defence at least a bit sorted out. But I still think we've got the big boys still to come. Let's just see where we are after that, particularly if they've got more than 8 people on a field at the end of it.
As you said, I think it was really good of Peter Gentle to leave the crypt today to attend the game. I thought that was quite good of him. Reece Sims had a bit of a blinder today.
Yeah, he stepped up the last 2 games, which is good. But again, is he going to be the Mitchell Moses of flat track bully, out there, or is he going to recuperate that 2018 form? We'll wait and see. I guess where I am, and much props last week, what I'm particularly pleased out of everybody is that Ben Hunt, I think, has stepped up, and I've always thought he's quality. Corey Norman, on the other hand, always beware of a man playing for a contract. 1 in 3 years is just simply not enough for the money that he's got. But there is some talk as well that we might be buying a few more ex-Broncos players, and who we're trading them for, I'm not that keen on hearing. We might be getting rid of Adam Clune to the North Queensland Cowboys, and we get Maguire back our way. Not so keen on that.
I actually don't think Adam Clune's been too bad. But, I did mention this on the show last week that you were one of the few Ben Hunt defenders, as we did a bit of a preview of the Dragons season. You sort of came to his defence. Ben Hunt, I know he's got a bit of a fracture in the leg. Hopefully it's not too bad. He'll be back at some stage this year. But Corey Norman, as you said, he's the one who's really surprised me, because I think he's been garbage for about 3 years. So, I hope that's not hitting too close to the bone for you. But is there a chance? You said he's playing for a new contract. Surely the Dragons won't sign him up again, will they? Because they've been trying to shop him around and get rid of him, haven't they?
Yeah, we've got 2 young kids coming through, Amone and Sullivan, we've got big raps on that. That's our future. And they're in their contracts, apparently in 2023, they need to be actually in their contracts. They need to be playing in our first, as our first starting hookers, as first starting half, should I say. So I think that even if we did offer Norman something, it would be, a year at half the rate. My concern is that Clune offers more versatility. He can come off, play hooker, but also he can play at the halves. And I think he'd play quite well with Hunt. But I guess the question with Norman is I'm not sure whether he's playing well or he's just playing better than what he was last year. He did play well today, I'll give him that. But yeah, I'd rather see him play somewhere else. 1 in 3 years is not enough.
Yeah. And, good luck to Corey. I hope he does get a new contract. Of course, he very famously won his previous contract on a blackjack table, which is pretty rare in the game of rugby league. And Adam Clune, I don't know if anyone else agrees, He has to be the oldest looking early 20-something that I've ever seen. That man must have come out of the womb with sort of middle-aged dad bod flab.
Andrew McFadden used to look like that as well. He kind of looked like he came out Benjamin Button style. So, yeah.
Yeah, the great McFadden. He was the guy that no one realised how old he looked because he wore the headgear for the first half of his career. And then when finally he took it off when he was probably about 28 for the first time ever, it was like a big reveal. And people were quite shocked at just how bald and old he looked.
Mm.
Look, we're going to just rattle through some talking points sequentially, guys. Mario, I'm going to go to you first, mate, because I'm not sure if anyone's across this story, but there's some rumours that Paul Green is coming to help your club, Mario, to help Des in the coaching. Now, help's not a word you want to hear when a secondary coach off contract comes in. Is this just a slow knife in the back that the Manly fans want? Do you foresee a chance that Paul Green could be the new coach at Brookvale?
I would take absolutely anyone that's not Des Hasler right now. I'd take Jason Taylor. I'd take Peter Gentle. I'd take Dean Pay. Des just needs to be shot out of a cannon into the sun.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's kind of the response I was probably anticipating. But let's go to the panel here, guys. Anyone can jump in. Is anyone else, I guess, as acerbic towards Des Hasler as Mario is? Do you think he's doing that bad a job? I know, obviously, the results this year would suggest things are not good. Last year, a bit of an injury crisis. Wasn't a great year either. But the year before that, got to the finals, looked quite good. Should he be banished from Brookvale forever for someone like Paul Green?
I think the decision's already been made, right? I mean, they got thumped the first couple of weeks and they extended his contracts. I mean, it's. I think he's Manly through and through by the sounds of things, and they're not going to budge on it. I kind of agree with Mario. I don't think it's a smart decision, but I don't see how you can make a decision like that and then turn around and look to bring somebody else in that quickly afterwards.
It's super strange. It really is. I mean, what message are they sending? Des Hasler, I obviously think he's a terrible coach these days, but you've sent him the message that, unless he's the one asking for the help, then what the hell's going on? And he's never seemed like the sort of guy who would ask for that sort of help. It doesn't seem to fit. So I'm a bit confused. It definitely feels like mixed messages.
And Mario, obviously, Manly are probably the only club that I remember in recent memory that did have two first-grade coaches at the club at once with the big Trent Barrett, Des Hasler fiasco. So they've got a bit of form on the board for having two coaches in the box essentially at the same time, sort of fighting it out Game of Thrones style.
Worked out really well last time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose at least I didn't mind making the final, so I suppose in a way it did work out okay. And frankly, it's not my money they're spending. If our owner wants to throw his money away, that's his business.
Well, I mean, wasn't the whole problem with the North Queensland Cowboys supposed to be Paul Green? So
Correct.
I'm not sure what new ideas Paul Green is going to bring apart from that 2015 blockway that he's been, peddling for the last 5 years. I just want to say to Mario, you've listed all those coaches that you take over him. I wouldn't take Stephen Carney over him as a Eels fan. So, maybe there's one or two coaches that are slightly worse than Des at this point. And I don't even know if you can say, look, just seems like Des is he thinks that, the magic's going to just come back to him at some point. It sort of feels that way. So I don't know whether it will come back to him, whether, Tommy Turbo is the key to it all, but they look so devoid of anything, like in any kind of passion, Manly. So
a bloke on Twitter that some may know called Ben Wallace shared a meme to me, which I think it was a Simpsons meme from memory. It was basically just saying, "Oh my God, we've tried absolutely nothing and we're completely out of ideas."
Yep. Yeah, that's what it looks like. Yeah.
No, there is a little bit of that, isn't there? And I guess, if you're going to read the tea leaves on this, sort of the pundits are suggesting that Des Hasler, especially with all the rule changes, the game has probably never progressed or transformed, I should say, so quickly in such a small amount of time. And people are wondering if Des is essentially playing old world footy in 2021. Don't know if there's any credibility in that view.
I mean, I certainly think there is. It just still feels like it's 2011 to him, and he's just got the attack looks absolutely flat, and the defense has no idea how to cope with what a modern attack does. That with the actual movement off the ball and everything that happens in modern rugby league, the various shapes that they employ, his defense does not cope with those movements, and we just simply let them walk past us untouched. And it's happening in the middle of the field and out the sides, but especially on the wings, we're just absolutely lost.
What do you think about the recruitment though, Mario? Like, have they been bringing the right players in? Is it just the fact that we changed the rules so quickly? Has he, I mean, I don't know who you guys have for this. You got Josh Alloway and some other one. You know what I mean? I'm not sure who's come in.
The thing is, he's been good, but my issue is we've got the players in reserve grade not being used. Guys, maybe they're not going to set the world on fire, but they're at least first grade quality players. Between Sadler and Cust and Harper and Funa, we've got a few good players right there that are better than what we're playing in first grade. Anyone except Des Hasler can see, and I've said it 4 weeks in a row now, that Dylan Walker is a terrible fullback, and this was probably his best game, at least with the ball. He still offered nothing, but he at least looked like he tried to offer something. But you look at every single try that gets scored against us, no matter where it is, Dylan Walker is almost never in shot. He's just not there. He doesn't know where to be. Brendan Elliott looked lost in attack, but at least he was decent in defense. And you see Tommy, you see Pap, you see Teddy, and even, I won't say Kalen Ponga, he's not quite on that level in terms of defense, but generally speaking, the guys that they know, the good players know where to be. And you can't, that's not even Dez's fault, but picking Dylan Walker in that spot every week is Dez's fault. And picking Lachlan Croker in that spot each week when he's only had 2 good games for Manly and they're both against Canberra. What is Des Hasler seeing that no one else sees? Literally no one.
Yeah, Mario, I was going to say this. I actually can tell you what's going to happen, because I reckon what's happening with Des at the moment has parallels with what Mary did. Sorry to bring it back to the Dragons. Is Mary had a whole range of young players ready to step up. Now, we're talking the Tristan Sailors. We had a guy called Lachlan Tim, who was the Canterbury Cup prop. We had a whole lot of young players that week in, week out, instead we chose underperforming so-called stars that never delivered. And ultimately what happened, of course, is we end up getting Flanagan in, the old established coach. I can see a lot of parallels between what we've been through and what you're about to go through. And this, due respect, signing up Des this time made no sense. No one was after him. Like, why bother? There's no need for it.
Yeah, you're right. Des Hasler is not hot property, is he?
No, it's funny you say
we
that.
Did the same.
I labelled them.
Yeah.
Sorry, I was going to say I labelled the Manly Sea Dragons this week because it's the same thing. They're about 2 years behind where the Dragons were, and they're signing up a coach that no one wants.
So the inevitable step is that Mario, I'll have to give you some lessons on how to deal with Twitter, and how to deal with failure really badly. It's what we call a Monday morning. How to blow up. I'll give you the instructions. I'm sure you'll be fine.
We can talk. We can talk off mic later. Yeah, I'll need the advice.
I was going to say, Jarnis, I'm sure it fills Mario with so much confidence to say you're about to enter the chapter that the Dragons are going through over the last 10 years. A bit of a sense of foreboding there. Lads,
right now, I would take the success the Dragons have had the last 10 years, which is no wooden spoons, because honestly, that feels like unrealistic hope for our next 3 years if Des stays in charge for 3 years. That being said, we've all watched the Cowboys and the Bulldogs, and they do give me some hope.
I almost feel like the Manly Seagulls, the Dogs, and the Cowboys should be broken off into a new comp, and they just do a round robin every week, because they're definitely not up to the standard of the rest of the competition, and their games actually might be close then.
It's super exciting. What we want is close games, apparently, because we're certainly not getting them at the moment. Yep, you're right. This will be the more successful comp, those 3 teams.
Mitchell Pearce injured today. It looks to be a neck injury, which is, of course, a double blow for Pearce. He's out of the footy team for months, and it's also his dominant sexting arm. Do you guys think that Newcastle can still make the finals without him?
Oh, look, I think the Dragons have a history of ending seasons. We ended your season last year with the injuries to Verrills and Radley. And I think that they're pretty much gone this year too. If Pearce is not there, and then those other lingering injuries, I just can't see them. I just don't think they have the the cattle or the established systems to get them through. They're not they don't have the runs on the board like East, for example, that run it more like their clubs, more like a squad mentality.
I saw where you're coming from there, but it is Mitchell Pearce, Jarnis, which is probably, I guess, closer to the point here. Is he a net loss, or is it a net gain not to have his conventional box kick 18 times a game enacted? And Xander, look, you obviously Mitchell was with our club for many years. He managed to expunge many potential premierships from our quite illustrious trophy box. Do you think it's a good thing that Mitchell Pearce isn't there anymore? Because I have to say this, I'm a big fan of Green, and I don't know if you guys know this, he's only played 4 games for them. They've won all 4 apart from today. I actually think he'd be a good replacement, but I'll let you take it away, Xander.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you'd want him to be. I think he's solid from what I've seen of him as well. But I think their injury crisis is a lot bigger than that. I mean, watching them against the Tigers last week was just atrocious. To be honest, I don't think I've ever seen a more inept performance. And I mean, a lot of that was just due to the fact that Tex Wood can't catch a ball. But they don't look like a finals outfit to me at all this year, even with Pearce in the side. I don't think it'll be a net gain for them, him being off, but I don't think it makes any difference on their chances, to be completely honest.
Mario, where do you see someone like Kurt Mann? He's been one of these guys that everyone's sort of labelled as a utility. He's sort of played basically every role on the field, barring prop at stages in his career. Apart from being knocked absolutely senseless in today's game, do you think he could be a bit of a fix for the Knights?
I think he's a useful player. I don't think he's not going to fix that team. I mean, as has just been said, they've just got a few too many weaknesses. I picked them 9th mainly because there was just more bad teams below them, and I think all of those teams are probably going to end up below them. But I mean, at this rate, Dragons might finish ahead of them, and hell, even the Tigers, who knows? Because Knights are maybe a little worse than we thought. But then again, we'll wait and see what happens with Ponga back. That he will help them a lot. I think he'll help out Blake Green. I'm not sure Mitch Pearce is needed if Green and Ponga can sort of run the show the way they do. They could still be a useful team, but certainly in no way a threat.
Does anyone know when Ponga's due back? Is he still about a month off?
It's probably wherever Tommy Turbo is.
Yeah, around 5, I heard.
Okay, so that's fairly imminent then. Well, that will obviously have its effect in returning some fortune for them, but it's certainly not going to be all on Ponga's shoulders. They'll need to do something about those outside backs. They look a bit thin out there. I like when Bradman Best is there, although he does tend to be injured a fair bit. There's that young kid with the dreadlocks that debuted last week. I'm not sure if you guys saw him, but Jesus Christ, he didn't catch a ball. It was about 8 times. It reminded me of Brendan the Brave, Mario, to be honest.
Their back 3 in general were just unable to catch at all. It was painful to watch. I think all the Tigers' tries came off them just dropping really simple sitters.
It was as though they didn't get the back 3 for the autism spectrum. It's like they didn't pass that test pre-game.
Yeah, well, to carry on that analogy, it was like the non-verbal autism in the forwards this morning, today. Like, they were just angry, particularly Clemmer.
So angry today. It was actually good to see Clemmer fired up for a change, because I don't know if the listeners are aware of this, but there is an exact ratio of Clemmer's anger to how many follicles he's wearing on top of his head, because bald Clemmer goes really well. But Clemmer with hair tends to be lacking in the intensity department. And this was probably the first game I've seen in ages where the haired Clemmer fired up.
Yeah, but I think the problem today was he gave away stupid penalties at the wrong time. If he doesn't give away that penalty in the scrum, maybe it's a different game completely.
That's another thing bald Clemmer's bad at. He tends to give away more penalties. That was rare as well, because haired Clemmer did give away, as you said, 3 or 4. But I prefer to see that not only as a Knights fan, but as a rugby league fan. You don't want to see subdued Clemmer. You want to see the one that looks a little bit like he's, likely to commit a felony.
Subdued Clemmer is Dylan Napper.
Not in the sex tape, mate. He was quite active in that one. No, look, I think the Knights, I'm sort of agreeing with everyone else here. I don't know if they're going to make finals this year. I think they'll be one of those teams lingering on the cusp of the 8 that might finish with a West Tigers-ish kind of year this season, particularly with the injury toll. But from slightly brighter spots, Pappenhausen. I'm a massive fan of the Pap. Anyone that listens to the show knows that. I was a big fan of the guy from his debut. What an effort player. But he does seem to get a little bit better. Not so much a little bit, quite a bit better this week. 4 tries in 11 minutes. How did we see it? Start with you, David.
Well, look, I was holidaying down the south coast, and I didn't actually watch that game, so I don't know. But I heard 4 tries in 11 minutes and thought, well, what team is he playing against? So that might be part of it as well.
They were pretty special efforts, to be fair.
Okay, that's fine. Didn't watch it. I'm on a wrap of a weekend. I didn't watch that game, so I'm sorry about that.
He also handed George Jennings a try that he probably could have scored himself, given the state of that defence. So I think 5 was certainly there.
All of his own tries.
Yeah.
That must be special if George Jennings scored a try. That's
2. George Jennings got 2.
What? Oh my God. Okay, I gotta go back and watch this game. Parramatta fans would not believe that George Jennings could actually score 2 tries.
I don't know if I'm reading the room properly here, but I want to hear more about David Hunter's South Coast trip.
Do you? Okay, it was a lovely afternoon. No, I went down with the family. We went down for Easter, so I just came back today.
I wasn't serious.
You interrupted my holiday, so I could come back and talk to you guys.
I appreciate you cutting your holiday short for us. This is obviously, I don't know if you're under any false impression, we don't pay any money to any of the guests on the show, but certainly respect your diligence turning up today. But no, it was 4 tries in 11 minutes. I was at home barracking for the Pappenhausen to break Frank Burge's old record. I think it's 8 tries. I think he was a forward as well. But it kind of dried up in the second half there. But this is the question I want to throw to the room. Jarnis, I'll start with you, mate. Where does Pappenhausen rank at the moment in comparison to guys like Tedesco and Latrell?
Yeah, see, I feel really sorry for Pappenhausen and Teddy. They're all talking about, he should be the next Origin fullback when we all know Matt Duffy's the chosen heir. Look, in honesty, I think Teddy still has it. I mean, he played well today. I think Pappenhausen's, again, he's an absolute gun, but Teddy's got runs on the board and still would be, if that's my choice of number 1 for New South Wales, Teddy would still have it. That's where I stand on that. But Pappenhausen's, ready. Yeah, what a luxury to have, column A or column B, really.
Yeah, look, he's got to be. I mean, I know people, it's too early to talk about Origin, but fuck it, I'll do it anyway. But because everyone else is.
I did too. So.
Yeah, well, you've got to, find a spot to get him in that team, surely. Like, even though they're 2 freaks and they play the same position, I'd have Pappenhausen somewhere in the outside backs. But, Mario, I wanted to throw to you on that same question, and also a secondary question. Where does Dylan Walker rank against those 2?
Well, I mean, Dylan Walker's just that tiny bit behind them. But, if we're talking about locks for, Origin fullback position, there's only one king, and it ain't Tedesco. So I'm just getting in before David Hunter says it, because he'll be right.
Cut me off.
David was sweating on that.
There's only one king, baby.
Man. Yeah.
David, as a para fan, mate, how do you find the nickname of the king? Do you find that is a good thing? Because obviously it wasn't Gutho, from what I understand, that self-anointed himself. It has been given to him, I think, by Joey Johns.
It was a joke. He was making fun of him. That's what it was. It was a make fun of him. He was playing 5'8", and he said, "Oh, he's just like King Wally. He's King Gutho." Like he was mocking him almost in a bit of like tongue in cheek. And it's become this thing. It's so funny as Parramatta fans because he is a very good player. Like I know we all talk about Tedesco and we're talking about these sort of guys. I don't think that Gutherson is better than any of them, but I think he's not much behind any of those guys. He is the heart and soul of the Parramatta team. It's without Gutherson at the back, Parramatta is not 3 from 3 at the moment. Like that's a fact that you've got to realise that. But look, I just find it really funny because it really infuriates other fans so much that we just lean into it now. We're just happy to keep calling him the king because the more that you hate the fact that we call him the king, the more we're going to call him the king.
But, to me, and I'm not even a Parramatta fan, to me he is the king, and not just because he said it's a bit of an ironic tag, but he is one of the gun players of the competition. His effort level is always 110%. And the one thing that I love about Gutherson is it's more than just what he brings in terms of his skill level. He's also a great character in the game, which I have to say are kind of drying up, in my opinion, a little bit. I love the fact that when he scores, every now and then he'll do a bit of an Elvis Presley-like hip swivel without all the underage sex, which is great. And it just keeps the bums on the seats, I think, David.
It definitely does. He needs to get a haircut, though. I'm not a big fan of the haircut at the moment, the big top knot. I think if any player can pull off a top knot, maybe he can, but I think he needs to slim that hair down a little bit. Probably needs to cut his sideburns, as we've been to Simpsons references here, just keep telling him to cut his sideburns. But I didn't know what to expect when he first came to Parramatta from Manly. He played. The only time I ever saw him play was a game for Manly against us where he got injured and was out for the whole year. And then when he turned up, every time I've seen him play, he puts maximum effort in, and that's all you can ask.
I could have told you that. I was so annoyed at Manly when we let him go. I just said, we are going to regret that. It's going to be a terrible decision, and oh, what a shock it has been. Shocking decision.
No, you could have had him at fullback, and we could have signed Dylan Walker for our fullback. That'd been fantastic.
Well, double win for me.
See, I thought that the King's sort of an example of, you give yourself a nickname and people start to believe it. So that's why, when I see massive Schlong Xander, that's what I thought he was trying to evoke. So pitching it out there anyway.
Is it working?
Well, apparently this weekend we don't know.
Are you asking if your Schlong is working, Xander?
No, just the reputation. It's
That did need to be clarified, I think.
That did need to be clarified.
Yeah. And Mario, in defence of Dylan Walker, you've had a go at his positional play at fullback, but it's not easy to play 80 minutes of footy and still vandalise a nearby pizza shop at the same time. That's tough.
I mean, the guy's a very talented fellow. He's obviously lived a very varied life. He's kind of a multi-sport hero. He's a bit of an Anthony Mundine or a Sonny Bill Williams. He likes to get involved in various endeavours, unlike these boring one-dimensional rugby league players. So we should be grateful to have someone like Dylan Walker in the sport.
I think Murray used to be really happy that you don't have Brian Smith as your coach, because God knows who would end up as your fullback. You'd be making game time decisions. You'd be putting probably DCE back there at fullback for a couple of games. It could be quite interesting.
Yeah, but I'd take a losing grand final.
You raise a good point there, mate. I'm pretty sure... No, I was about to blame Brian Smith for something that Brad Fittler did. I know that one of the craziest positional changes that I can remember the Roosters making is in the midst of that 2009 wooden spoon season for the Roosters. In desperation, Freddie put Braithen Astor at fullback, which was... honestly, they should have just played Benny Hill music over the whole thing, because he never made a ball. He's a very slow man, Braith. And every time they put the kick in, it was actually weird to see the fullback not make it to the ball. It was a bizarre thing to watch. I want to move on to some injuries, guys, because obviously this year has already been marked by a host of injuries. In fact, there's been less carnage at the recent protest in Myanmar. And I want to know from you guys what you think's driving them. There's been a lot of theories. Is it the rule changes, the speed of the game? Is it extra fatigue? Or is it all just a beat-up? Is this just the same amount of injuries, but maybe it's happening to high-profile players? I'll start with you, Xander. What's your take on all of that?
It's a bit of a small sample size still at the moment, right? I mean, it's round 4, and it's not unheard of that you've seen teams get decimated by injuries early in the season. And some of the ones that we've seen so far, they're pretty freakish. What happened to Kiri seemed really innocuous. The MCL to Lamb as well. When you look at each of them as individual cases, it doesn't seem like something that's caused by serious fatigue. I mean, Pearce today with the pec, wasn't exactly in the 80th minute when they were all exhausted. So I don't know. I think you probably need to have more of a look at each team's strength and conditioning approach. So I don't know if there's been that much more game time to justify that level of concern yet, personally.
Do you think, though, I think the logic stacks up, right? The idea that maybe it's not so much the speed of the game, but if there is more fatigue, that your technique going into tackles, for example, isn't going to be as good as it was previously. That, when you're under fatigue and your heart rate's higher, you tend to make dumber decisions. Big shout out again to Dylan Walker. Murray, is there any credence to that? Do you think that Xander's right and we kind of need a larger sample size, or can you already see a clear pattern here?
We definitely can't call it a pattern yet. It is certainly a small sample size. The numbers are concerning, but I think going off on it too early would be like the Gronks going on about AstraZeneca causing blood clots despite any actual evidence.
Yeah, fair enough, and I certainly
Segue
in the vaccine into this highly charged rugby league debate. The NRL has already reacted, Mario, and Jarnis, you're probably across this already. This whole 18th man developing player, which is, I think, coming into effect from next round, if I'm correct. I don't think it's in this round yet. Where essentially, if there is an unusual event of 3 HIAs, that there will be a younger person, popped into the team to combat a team having no bench players at all. Seems like a rare event, to be honest. Do you think that is just reactive NRL at its best, or do you think it's a good idea?
Yeah, I think it's reactive. I actually like the idea of the 18th man. I don't like the idea of a developing player. Initially, I did like it, but then, the point was, the Sharks case last week. Do you really want a developing player out there, to front up against seasoned professionals straight away? Good point in that circumstance. The other thing too is that it's not only about protecting the fatigue of the player coming on, but also the players around that. I guess this is the hard thing is that they're all worried about the rules being gamed. I think the solution can be as simple as looking at the cup games below us, the Canterbury Cup games, where I understand that if a player's being sent off for HIA, they miss that following week, regardless of what happens. So you're not gonna, coach isn't gonna game the system if he's gonna, get an established player off for an HIH, knowing that next week you're not gonna be able to fix him up.
Yeah, no, that's a good way. There's obviously more than one way to skin the cat, right? The idea of preventing coaches or teams from gaming the system. Certainly, the emerging player might be one way, but it does seem like a strange way. As you said, it comes with sort of obvious pitfalls. One being throwing in a person who's just not ready for the rigours of first grade and potentially getting hurt themselves comes to mind. But I like the idea of actually having mandatory sit-out periods for people who have failed the HIA. Because surely then, the price for any coach looking to be malevolent with that system would be too high.
Yeah, but it comes back to something I believe that, Robinson and Bellamy, you look at the way in which they run their clubs at the moment, their rosters, they use that full 30-man roster. Your concussion protocols are outstanding. And I think that, ultimately that becomes more of a sort of a broader strategy in play rather than just simply pulling players in and out when they fall down. So I guess from a broader point is I think it's leading to a broader conversation about just how the roster management is going to be increasingly important. To meet some of these things, and kudos. I think that Easts are the way to go. I hate to say it hurts me to say this, but I think the way they're dealing with the concussion rules are exemplary, and it's something that I wish clubs like mine would look at.
Well, I mean, it's a good segue to talk about Mr. Jake Friend. The rumours are, and this hurts me.
Before we go too much further, can I soapbox on the 18th man? I've got a
mate,
bit of
sure.
Yeah, sorry. I was waiting for you to call on me and you hit me. But that's fine.
I was a cut-out pass, David.
Yeah, that's okay. All right. So, with this 18th man protocol, I don't know if many people remember this, but remember when the NYC, the under-20s competition, first started, they actually brought in a rule where two players who had played previously in the NYC were put on the bench for the NRL game and were able to be used as free substitutions in case you lost a player. And I don't know how many seasons it was in for, but I'm pretty sure that it was never used. So when Jarnis is saying, look, you don't want to put a development player in there, I think all coaches wouldn't want to do that. That would be a ridiculous thing to do. And I think that an 18th man has got to be a seasoned professional. You can't have young kids running up in pressure situations like that. And I mean, it's basically put to you that all the coaches in 2008 weren't willing to do it. So I don't know why they were willing to do it in 2020. And with with these injuries and, with people, it's not so much the injuries that I think people have got a problem with the rules. I think they've got a problem with the perceived slowdown of quality of the play. There's a lot of bash and barge tries happening, a lot of, very lazy efforts, and I think some of them are leading to injuries. So I put on Twitter the other day, I said, look, why don't we have, at the 20-minute and 60-minute mark, why don't we have like a 5-minute, just a drinks break kind of thing, just to stop. No matter what happens, no matter what's happened to that point, whatever the next tackle is, we just have a break. And I felt a little bit justified when Paul Broughton actually said exactly the same thing on Twitter as well. I don't know whether you guys think that that's a good idea, but if you give players about 5 minutes or so at the 20-minute and 60-minute mark, I think that some of this fatigue will come out of it a little bit, and we won't get as many injuries.
But what happens to the little guy then, David? What happens to the little guy?
You still got plenty of time for the little guy. The little guy can be good in the 19th minute, 39th minute, 59th, and the 79th minute. It'll be fine. 20 minutes is a long time.
You're right. And look, I guess the idea of these new rules, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess is, the NRL's way of trying to engineer more fatigue into the game. And I guess you're talking about that from a player safety standpoint, which makes a lot of sense. But from a product entertainment standpoint, I think the NRL are sort of wanting to see more fatigue. So it would sort of maybe run counter to what their overarching objective is there. I'm not sure if anyone else agrees.
Look, I think that you've got the quality of the games have been a bit lower too, because we've had too much fatigue. I think you've got to bring it back the other way, even if it's only a 2-minute break, not a 5-minute break. Something that just sort of, when the ball goes out and players are, feigning injuries just so they can get that little bit of extra break. If we give them that little bit of extra break, maybe we don't get as much of that.
Maybe a scrum. Maybe a scrum when the ball's kicked out. There's a new idea. They should try something like that.
That would also help. Sorry to interrupt. That's all I wanted to say. I just from the soapbox.
No, mate, please, soapbox away. I love it. And Xander, look, David raises an interesting point there. I want to get your views on this. If there were to be 2-minute breaks at, say, the 30th minute or the 50th minute, somewhere around there, what should happen in that time? Do you think there should be some entertainment for the crowd? And what can you do in 2 minutes?
I mean, knowing the NRL, I'm pretty sure it would be a KFC commercial.
Doing my
yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I mean, it's a bit of an odd one. Like they do it already, right? When they have preseason trials, when they play it in summer, they have short drinks breaks at the 20 and 60-minute mark. They don't do anything entertainment-wise to monetize that, but it's certainly not without precedent.
Could Monahan not come on for 2 minutes and let a dog suck him off? Just pitching it as an idea. I'm assuming that silence is a big no.
Look, I think there'd be a competition between him and Mitchell Pearce, wouldn't there?
Well, mate, I keep pointing this out in the podcast, Mitchell Pearce's pants did stay on. I know he was an unwanted.
That's just because the dog was not willing.
This is true. If only the dog could be an accurate character defence. I think the dog was part of the Me Too movement.
I mean, it's very good to know that Mitchell Pearce understands consent better than, a decent percentage of the male population.
But look, I guess as an adjoining topic, all these injuries, I'm not sure if this caught anyone else's eye, but obviously there's a lot of bad press around Kafusi last week for his forearm on Madison.
Dog.
Whether or not there was an intentional act or not, he got a bit of a slap on the wrist for it. But again, in the South game, Cody Walker coming down to their head with an intentional forearm. I think it was, trying to think of who he hit. I think it might have been Nick Meaney, the Dogs. Looks like he's only copped 1 week. In the midst of all this head knock and concussion talk, do you guys think that's a bad look for someone who he was actually using malice to forearm someone in the back of the head, and he got a week?
Yeah, I was genuinely surprised by that. Like, I mean, after the Kafusi incident, it received so much coverage, and they said they were going to be looking at it and revising the way they approached those sorts of acts. You would have thought they'd have come down a little bit harder.
I think it matters that it's Cody Walker and not Boyce Kafusi, which is unfortunate because it seems to matter who the player is when it actually happens.
So what do you mean by that, David? Are you talking about the difference between the way Souths are treated and Melbourne are treated, or what are you getting at?
Maybe not so much that. I think it's I think Boyce Kafusi, he's a bigger player. He's a forward. He's got a bit of reputation. I think Cody Walker, half. I'm going to go back to Parramatta here, but I remember an incident when Pui Moi Moi hit someone in a high tackle and got 9 weeks. And a similar tackle in the same game, someone obviously can't hit as hard as he can. I didn't get any suspension at all. So it seems to be that the big kids don't play well with the little kids, and they give them bigger penalties.
Well, Jarnis, it's interesting that it says that, right? Because, for me, Cody Walker actually has a bit of form on the board when it comes to the niggle. And even in the same game, I think he stomped on the foot of Corey Waddell. And it's sort of a bit of a niggle that seems to go unnoticed. I know I'm a Roosters fan, I'm showing my badge at the door here, and I do have some skin in the game. Not a big fan of Souths, but to me, I do feel as though Souths are a club that get away with a little bit of that niggle, and I'm not entirely sure.
Totally, and you only need to see, Sam Burgess, who I thought had a lot of grubbing in, that seemed to not sort of be brought up. It's interesting how some players seem to hide that grub. I would argue, is it Militano, the Sharks winger? Great player, but it seems to always go on. There's that little bit of extra after. And Cody Walker, I'd agree with as well. The only thing is that I'd say is that to sort of parrot Mario, but essentially fuck the Storm. They've been doing it for years, and if it means that people are finally taking notice of it, then we'll fuck them.
Amen.
I love it. I hope all of our segments end with fuck it. That's where I hope the conversation basically gets elevated to. It actually makes me recall, I think it was a game last year where the poor, hapless Josh Reynolds was playing for the Tigers. It was a game between the Souths and the Tigers. And Josh got off on the field. I think he was filling in for someone who was injured and for someone who was injured for someone who was injured because, he holds down the number 21 jersey. And he came on in a rare performance and he put a kick through and he was trying to toe the ball again. He ended up kicking the fullback in the head who went down to get the ball. It wasn't good. He didn't flush, but was clearly an accident. And in the same game, Latrell Mitchell, in retaliation with a clenched fist, punched him from behind in the jaw. And South got the penalty. Nothing really happened to Latrell. I think he pleaded early guilty. He didn't miss a week. I think Josh got 3 weeks. There's certainly some inconsistencies happening over there at Redfern for me.
Yeah, I wouldn't say. I'd say that the Souths are a bit of the darling of the league. I'd agree with that. Having said that, I seem to think that remember Tyson Frizzell got 2 weeks for brushing a referee. And we can use the example, but I would say that because, I'm a conspiracy theorist at the best of times, so I think we all should carry that. But yeah, look, certainly South seem to have some players that seem to get away for a bit.
And by the way, how is all your QAnon stuff going? Are you still planning to storm the Capitol building next month?
Well, as I've explained, certainly I believe that the day of reckoning will happen and we will eventually respond to the AFL and storm the Capitol. And Peter V'landys is our Lord and Saviour and save us from the AFL scourge.
Fantastic. But Brett Dallas couldn't have said it any better. Look, I do want to flip off to something a little bit new. This was only breaking the last sort of 48 hours, but Bronson Cherry, fellas, we all know he's the guy who took ram's blood along with 4 or 5 different stimulants and human growth hormones and thought he'd get away with it. He didn't. He got 4 years. But it's come out today, he's looking to not just rest on his laurels while he's sitting on the sideline. He actually wants to potentially make an NFL switch. Mario, do you think this is going to be a successful venture? As you've already pointed out, these things tend to end quite well, don't they?
I just want to know, why do we care about anything Bronson Cherry says or does?
I think it's because we can put the headline Cherry Bomb into it.
Well, I'd rather just listen to the John Cougar Mellencamp song.
Okay. What about you, Xander? You might have a little bit more enthusiasm for American sport. I'm not sure. Bronson Cherry, could he make a go of it? And B, this is where the real question is for me. Is this a slight on the NRL? Or he's been sanctioned by our sport, and rather than sitting out and taking on his comeuppance like a good Jake Friend would and work, 7 hours a day at a sandwich shop and slowly work his way back into an NRL career, he's going to fuck off to America and potentially make a go at over there. Do you think it sort of goes to the heart of him not being particularly contrite for what he's done?
I mean, yeah,
can't really speak to his mental state of mind, but
No, please do.
good luck to him is all I can say. You know, I mean, the NFL is not an easy competition to crack. You know, I mean, we've had two very talented players have a go at it. Didn't work out for Valentine Holmes at all. Jared Hayne had some very limited success. Cherry hasn't even really made a name for himself in the NRL yet. Not really. The idea that he's going to go over there, you know, and crack the NFL. I think if he's got 4 years to kill, you know, have a crack at it. But I honestly think he probably have a better shot at going to French rugby.
If performance-enhancing drugs leave you barely good enough for an average side in rugby league, then you're fucked in NFL.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I reckon we should speed.
Honestly, that Mario, that Bronson Cherry was only an average player for the Sharks.
Yeah, he was a decent player, but at best, and the Sharks are a perfectly average team. I have zero fear or concern that he's going to have any success in the NFL. He's not big enough. He's not strong enough. He's not fast enough. He's nothing.
He is big. I've got to say, I've seen the photos of him lately. They say that he's off the juice. I'm not so sure. Just looking at the training montages of him at the moment, like, Jesus Christ, for a guy who's 20, he's not on Herbalife.
Yeah,
not sure what it is.
Ligandrol has some amazing effects.
Is for NFL rosters is that so he'll get one of these international developing roster spots wherever, like whatever they do when they same thing Valentine Holmes did. But to actually make it to a roster, when you've got all these kids coming through from college that have spent their whole life basically training for this, and he's just going to pick it up, he's going to make an NFL squad. It's very rare that it ever would happen.
Extremely difficult. Only 2% of the college kids make it into the NFL to start with, so the competition's going to be massive.
Yeah, but Jarnis, surely this depends on how much gear he's likely to get on it.
Yeah, you see, I reckon with his speed, I reckon he'd be well suited for one of those made-up sports that Channel 7 video views, whether it's Ultimate Tag or AFL. I mean, realistically,
put him on a revival of Gladiators.
Exactly. Look, I view this. I'm starting to get into NFL, and fuck, it is a completely different sport to what he would come at. The angles, the training, what he's required. To be honest, I think it sort of strikes me as more of a telegraph beater. He's a good boy that the mole or some other sex pest name will come up with. Like a Jacko Hastings. He deserves another shot. And I must admit, I'm a bit with Mario. Fucking did the wrong thing. And no one player is bigger than the whole. We will survive. The Sharks will survive. Fucking.
Is the ban just for rugby league? Like, can he play, or is it NRL only? So could he go and play in that new North American rugby league thing that just got pitched recently?
That's a great question. From what I understand, it's just an NRL sanction.
So he could go to any one of. He could go and play in the French rugby league or no one plays in the Super League. Sorry, or like the CFL XFL merger that's about to happen. He could play any of these sports.
He could, but some people would argue playing Super League, I'd rather just sit out.
Now, guys, there is speculation that Jake Friend may not play another match. Apparently, he's had his third concussion in the space of like one season, like 1 season's worth of games. They actually are worrying numbers. And I guess, not that I'm a head knock expert, despite my, clear brain damage, I'm not. But according to them, the thing about it is when players can get concussed really easily on subsequent occasions. So we've already seen it with Boyd Cordner, for example, in Origin. It looked to be barely innocuous, and yet he looked completely down and out. So apparently that is a sign of brain trauma. And Jake certainly might fall into that category. As a Roosters fan, Xander, I'm going to start with you. Would you like to see him retire, or do you think he should play on them and finish out the season?
What's in his best interest is the most important thing. He's got an incredible story, Brendy. I mean, he came back from being sacked, won 3 premierships, He's got nothing left to prove at this point. I think he needs to just think about the next phase of his life. I reckon if the doctors are telling him, this is something that can get worse, then you should probably just hang up the boots. Maybe even as a club, we're better off at just starting the transition plan now.
Jarnis, look, your club's taken it a little bit differently. The Roosters sort of lead the way when it comes to head knock health and concussion health. But, I've already heard from the likes of James Graham and Josh Kerr that they're happy to die for their club. Where do you sort of fall on this kind of stuff? Obviously, Jake Friend is going to be advised by medical experts whether or not he should play on again. The word is that he won't be. We kind of touched on this on our last show, but you weren't here. I'm interested to get your thoughts about the idea of player agency in all of this. Do you think a player should have the ultimate decision over their own career, or in the case of Jake Friend, if the professionals advise him that his career is over, should that be the way it is, or should Jake make that choice?
I'm more of the view that it should be that the player makes that determination, if you will. They all make the decision to step on that field in the first place. I guess the question is where, and I'm not the lawyer in the room, but where is the duty of care that both the club and the league should play in that? And I think it basically comes to one of support and the financial backing to say, well, we'll give you the medical advice that you need to have. We will provide you as much guidance and advice. But I mean, ultimately, it's no different to any other injury that a player may sustain, a neck injury or something along those lines that could create other issues as well. Me personally, and I'm not in that position, but, I think, Jake Friend probably, is making the right decision if he chooses to do that. But again, I really can't put myself in the position of the Josh Kerrs or the like as well, because I'm just not in that. I'd rather let them make a decision, if you will.
David, look, this idea of playing for your club, as a fan, would you die for the Eels if it meant, having to sustain repeated head knocks watching the Eels, which is apparently what a lot of West Tigers fans feel like at times? Would you be prepared to die for the Eels as a fan?
Is it already too late for David?
Look, I was born an Eels fan. I can't get out of it. This concussion stuff is, I feel like, 20 years from now, we're all going to say, God, they were stupid to do things the way they did it. It's always the way that things are. I just don't know. I think if the doctors at this point say he's got a real risk that something bad could happen, I don't begrudge him for retiring Jake Friend. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just not sure what the best way to go about this is, because obviously it's a contact sport. We're going to get large collisions. We've taken the shoulder charge out, which was supposed to help a lot of this. But, I always laugh at the people on Twitter going, oh, look, maybe they just all should wear headgear, and, not thinking about the fact that your brain's not actually being protected by headgear at all.
No, it's not. And anyone that's plugged into those reports and read them, that it really does show up the fact that something like headgear is completely superfluous. It might look good for optics, because someone might not be pissing blood out of their head on the field, which might turn fans off and people wanting their kids to play it. But as you said, it's the whiplash, isn't it? It's the severe physics of giant men, who are getting bigger, colliding with each other at faster speeds than they have before. Ultimately, there's going to be a cost to just playing NRL.
Definitely. And look, I just know what the answer is. Just a background to my, professional career. I do things in the building industry, and we were recently talking on Twitter about, why don't they build them as good as they used to? And it's like, well, when they built them in the old days, they didn't build them very well either. It's just we didn't know any better. You know what I mean? It feels like the same thing's going to happen. It's be like, well, why didn't they tell this guy to medically retire? But we don't know. They're still doing a lot of research on this sort of stuff. They don't know exactly what the best way of approaching it is, and it feels like these guys are the guinea pigs for now.
Mario, I mean, it's an emerging topic, and it moves. The policies moves along with the science, and there's a lot more happening in that concussion space. In terms of diagnostics, for example, there's light eye tests and things like that, which I think are going to move things along. But having thought about this myself, I quite like the idea of the NRL sort of implementing some kind of mandatory framework here where, and I'm kind of pulling numbers out of my arse here, but for example, if a player sustains, more than 3 concussions in the space of, 25 games, for example, that means they have to set X amount of games out as a mandatory. Do you think something like that could work?
I think it can, provided they're only replaced with an emerging player.
Okay, so you think they come in for 25 loads of games? I quite like that. That's very PVL.
Yeah, well, I mean, apparently 3 is the magic number now, isn't it?
I don't know if you guys have the same impression. It doesn't feel like there's more concussions now. I think it might feel that way, but I think it's because, the trainers and the players and the game is onto it more and they're more protective. Is that the impression you guys have as well?
Yeah, I reckon it's a lot of it's down to the fact we have a concussion protocol to begin with. I can remember, when we were watching footy before all this started, particularly when you look at those old Origin series from the early 90s and, going back to games from the 90s, players were just encouraged to shake it off. You wouldn't have thought, twice about it.
In that Origin game, just talking to Origin, we all remember the time that Marty Bella got up and played the ball backwards. And it's a meme now, everyone laughs at it. But there's no doubt he was fully concussed at the time and probably should. And if it was nowadays, he would be off the field. But no, he was just play on Marty, it's fine,
I think that's part and parcel, David, of being, a giant forward with moustache and balding. People just tend to laugh at you because you've got that kind of comic physique. But I think you're right. We had no conception back then, did we, of how serious... people, even the idea of using the word concussion, right? It's a bit of almost a PR spin, right? It is brain trauma. If people started using the phrase brain trauma or brain injury, it might come home for people a little bit more. But I think when we use the word concussion, even that term puts us at a distance to it.
Well, I think the NRL don't want to use that term because they're still trying to encourage kids to play. So if you said, oh, look, we've got this brain injury protocol, I don't know how many parents are going to want their kids to play, a sport that has to have that. Yeah,
good point. And I suppose a lot of the parents would point out that NRL players have brains. That was news to me. Look, there's another little topic I wanted to round off the show with, guys. It's obviously the talk of expansion, coming in with the Brisbane 2, the second team. And there's been a lot of criticism this week, especially in light of the giant gap that's already emerged in this year's competition. As Mario sort of alluded to earlier, there is sort of top 7 teams and the rest. Do you guys think that there are some serious implications to expanding the comp when it looks as though there is a thinning out of talent at the bottom end, or do you think it's a bit of a beat up? Might start with you, Xander.
There's genuine concerns. I mean, it's not even, like the bottom 4 teams are just nowhere near the standard of the rest. It's not even just that, but also the coaches, right? I mean, there's been a real merry-go-round of coaches for clubs that haven't been successful, and they all seem to trade the same coaches that haven't succeeded elsewhere, right? Like Nathan Brown going to the Warriors. I think there's a genuine question there. I mean, I don't know. They're talking about Bellamy potentially coming to coach this new side. If they can pull that off, then maybe. But they're going to need to have some big signings to make that thing successful from the get-go.
Yeah. Well, Jarnis, is this enough to say no to expansion? The idea of this gulf that seems to be widening. Do you think it's enough for us to say let's put a bit of a hold or a handbrake on any further expansion plans? It looks like Brisbane 2 is happening regardless, but there's been a lot of talk about potentially including another team, so there's no buys, for example, and having a second team. Do you think that is going to thin it out too much?
Look, I think expansion is imperative. I think we need to build a broader fan base and certainly geographical areas as well. I think the broader problem though is not just a matter of the people you put on the pitch, but listening to the big shout out to the Rugby League Digest. One of the key areas is also establishing key back behind boardrooms, the right board, and both David and I and indeed Mario can understand what that pain is all about. It's about getting proper administration. and you build the back rooms properly, then it develops from there. So I think there is scope for that, but I think that there needs to be perhaps better. I want to use the word mentoring or something, but a better, I guess, clarity around administration as your first basis before you really jump into a program, or we're just repeating the mistakes of the mid-90s.
Yeah, because we don't want Adelaide Rams Mark II, do we? Although Graham Apper was a great player, but he probably shouldn't be in any record books anywhere when it comes to rugby league. Look, I don't know if this could be a furphy, Mario. I might throw this to you because, there's always a gulf between the top teams and the bottom teams, obviously. And I'm wondering if, the way that scoring has changed. Obviously, there's a lot more tries at the moment with the rule changes. There's been, the idea that when a good team gets a momentum roll on, it's really difficult for a lesser team to roll it back. So I'm wondering if we're just looking at this idea of the golf in terms of the scoreboard, if we're not overblowing it a bit, because I kind of got the feeling that in the last couple of years, that same golf's been there. It's just not as exaggerated on the scoreboard.
I don't think we've ever had three or four such obviously bad teams at once, but again, we're still going off a little half cock just because of the whole early into the season and stuff. But it's hard to see, apart from Tommy coming back, out of those bottom 3-4 teams, it's hard to see a huge amount of improvement for any of them. And I'm obviously not convinced that Tommy coming back makes Manly suddenly a top 8 team. But I don't think it's due to a gulf in talent of players, though, because like I've said, I think all those teams have got better players that could be used in better ways. I think it's more to do with the coaching. There's too many coaches just who are not up with the current standards. It's amazing that guys like Wayne and Bellamy, who are so old, are more able to adapt to new rule changes and new styles of the game than a younger coach like Trent Barrett. It's quite strange, but I think it's just a matter of they're smart and he dumb.
Mario, how do you explain that anomaly? You're right. Wayne Bennett, for example, is someone that seems to keep up with the trends. The game's never been through a more dramatic transformation in the last couple of years, and yet his team seems to be getting better. And this is someone who's old enough to remember the Boer War. How does someone like Wayne Bennett keep up with these kind of trends and someone like Des Hasler doesn't?
Wayne, I mean, there's no easy answer. Wayne is just, there's a reason he's won as much as he has and been successful as much as he has. He's just really good at his job, whereas Des has had success, there's no question. But when you look back at that Manly squad that he had and he won those grand finals with, they were pretty goddamn good, and the team really picked themselves. And
your forward pack back then, that's what I remember. The guys, when Watmail was good and Glenn Stewart and those, God, you had a good forward pack in the sort of the golden age of the Seagulls.
But David, Mario, I mean, the Seagulls have won just as many premierships as Wayne Bennett has in the last 20 years.
Yeah, but he's stayed consistently up there. He's kept teams. He took that Knights team that he took to the prelim and almost got them to the grand final. They were not a good squad. And the moment he left, it was shown just how bad they were. He did amazing things with that team, in my opinion. I understand his last premiership was back in 2010, but, he was a Ben Hunt drop ball away from one only, 6 grand finals ago. So that still has got to tell you that he's still there.
I just enjoy the fact that a Ben Hunt dropped a measurement of time, and a lot happened in that moment. I don't know if you guys saw this. You know this, Jarnis. Apparently, I think it was Greg Alexander mentioning this in the commentary that Ben was copying a bit of a Bronx cheer from the kickoff in the Broncos game. Did you notice that, or is that all bullshit?
I'd say it's all bullshit. I think the most important thing out of this conversation is to demonstrate that the 2010 grand final was, I dare say, the last time that good has triumphed over evil to such point that, Aimon, you're on record of saying you hate Brett Morris on another podcast that David would be aware of. And I think that's a rugby league crime that I normally would be outraged about, but I just think we should point that out, and maybe we could all, in this time of wokeness, recognise where you've gone wrong and apologise to rugby league.
Thank you, mate. No, look, I do plan on self-flagellating with a cat of nine tails of leafy goodness later in the day. For anyone interested, that was on David Hunter's Hypothetical Rugby League podcast, where I did, and there was some nuance there, Jarnis. You're leaving that out, mate, because I did say that I'd turned around on Brett Morris, and I hated myself for not liking him back in 2010. But David, just on
I
you,
didn't get that far. I hung up right. I stopped the podcast right then because I'm not prepared to listen to such drivel after that, to be honest.
I lost a lot of
Anyone
Dragons
ever-
fans that day.
Surely no one ever disliked Brett Morris. I'm confused.
he is pretty damn likable, I have to say.
He's too likable.
David,
Queensland.
on the topic of expansion, mate, where are you on that? I don't know your thoughts. You've done plenty of hypotheticals over your time, but I'm not entirely sure where you sit on the idea of the NRL expanding. We are getting that second Brisbane team. So 2 questions. Are you for some expansion? And 2, do you think this gulf in the competition at the moment is going to be a problem for convincing, the Rugby League Authority to actually add another team after that?
Yeah, look, I don't think you can ever have 17 teams. I think if you're going to go 17, you're going to go 18. What Jarnis was saying, I'm worried that the NRL, hopefully they've learnt their lessons from 1995 where they put 4 new teams in and we went to 20. And I think we tried to expand way beyond our means, and obviously, a lot of other things happened at the same time. I'm also a very avid League Digest listener, so I know all about that sort of stuff they're talking about. But look, I think there's enough quality players out there. I just think that you're always going to have poor teams at the bottom, and look, you got to say there's been 3 poor teams in the first 4 rounds, and you never know what's going to happen. Canterbury have been a poor team, many years in a row, and then sort of had these late season runs, and it's kind of papered over some cracks for them as well. So, there's always going to be the teams, the haves and the have-nots. So I don't know if having 18 teams as opposed to 16 is going to make that much of a difference. And I do think the quality is still there. And, realistically, I don't know whether Brisbane 2 is the best thing to go about. Maybe I can see the commercial reason for it. But, I really think that we missed a huge opportunity to go back to Perth a few years ago, and it might be too late now, but I still think that might be the next sort of step. And I wouldn't mind if we had 18 and they were in there. I also kind of think that some of these Sydney clubs maybe need to, I know I don't want to go through that whole pain went through the amalgamations again, but I think we might need to revisit whether having 9 Sydney clubs is actually good going forward.
It's interesting. Food for thought. You might be copying a few more Manly Perth Eagles chat, Mario, if that happens. Because I understand every time there's a relocation conversation, it does tend to be Manly, the Tigers and the Sharks. I think probably quite unfairly when it comes to some of those clubs. But do you worry about that, Mario? Do you worry about the idea of an Eagles team being relocated or merged? And if so, would you still support them if they did?
I no longer live in the Northern Beaches, so I don't get to go to Brookie as often as I used to. So it wouldn't really make that big a difference to me if they moved. So yes, I'd still support them. I think economically, Manly probably makes sense because they're not making that much money as a club. Geographically, I think it would make no sense to move Manly because then you'd just leave that area open and just hand it to rugby forever, which I think would be a shame. Whereas the Sharks geographically make no sense to exist. They shouldn't be there, but economically they're doing okay. So it really depends on what criteria you look at in terms of which team should go. What I think there's no doubt about is that the 9 teams are too many in Sydney, and 5 should, in my opinion, 5 is the right number. And even then, long term, perhaps fewer than that.
I like that. It's very finalistic saying Sharks don't have a right to exist. It's like they're the Israel of the NRL. Guys, we might wrap our conversations there. What I did want to do is actually finish with a fun little game if you guys are keen. It'll be the first to 2, so it doesn't go for too long. You only get 1 shot. These are the rules. You only get 1 shot, and to buzz in, you just got to say your name. All right, here's the first one. I was born in 1998, and I'm of Samoan heritage. I still play on the right wing for the Penrith Panthers.
Mario?
Yes, Mario.
Charlie Staines plays in the right wing for the Penrith Panthers at the moment. Wouldn't be 23 though. Okay, I fouled. I'm out.
David.
Yes, David's in.
Is it Brian To'o?
It is Brian Oh, well done. I hope I didn't send you astray by saying left on that wing. I'm going off.
He might play left wing.
Yeah, I'm going off Wikipedia, Mario. So you got fucked over by Wikipedia. I'm outsourcing
He's
that.
left wing now, but oh well.
All right, well done, David. You're off the mark, mate. You're one away from victory. Well done. Okay, who am I? My middle name is William. You might not know that. And I was born on the 20th of October, 1969.
Nice.
Thanks, Mario, for the comment. Now, I'm retired, obviously, given the DOB, and I was a centre 5'8", who played in the 80s and 90s. So I played for Australia on 26 different occasions, and I'm considered one of the finest players of the 20th century. I may have played...
Jarnis.
Yes.
Probably too old. Wally.
It is not Wally Jarnis.
Wally.
Mario.
Yes, Mario.
Steve Renoff.
It is not Steve Renoff. Then there were two. It's down to Xander and David. Who will hold their nerve? We'll find out after the break. No, we won't. We'll continue. I played for the Green Machine.
David.
Yes, David.
Is it Laurie Daly?
It is Laurie Daly. David, clean sweep, mate. You've won it 2-0. Congratulations, mate. And it's good timing because we are running out of time in our Zoom session. It just popped up to alert me. So congratulations, David. You are the proud owner of a 1980s version of the Encyclopedia Britannica. I'll send you out the CD-ROM. So enjoy that. And guys, that brings us to the end of the show. Thank you very much for doing this weird, novel TVT panel. I hope you enjoyed yourselves. Do you have any final thoughts, guys, to leave the listeners with before we go?
I have no thoughts at the best of times.
No, my head's empty now. I got nothing left.
Okay. But we are a brains trust. That's why I love our show. Look, Murray did point this out. It's something that I should probably finish most of the shows with. You can follow our show on most forms of social media. I think we've got it on Twitter, we're on Facebook, we're also on Instagram. If you get a chance to like or rate or comment on the show, we are on most of the major platforms as well, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, and about 9 or 10 porn sites. So get involved. Thank you for listening. And guys, thank you for joining me for another session of the TVT. Very enjoyable.
Thank you.
Thanks, gents.